Hi everyone, welcome to Chalchitra Talks. I am Hindol and on today's guest episode we have Asim Chabra with us. Asim is a film writer and the festival director of the New York Indian Film Festival. I got a lot of interesting recommendations from Asim on movies, books, TV shows and a lot more. Let's jump right into the conversation I had with Asim. Hey Asim, hi, welcome to Chalchitra Talks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've been getting a lot of comments from you in the quiz episodes, and a lot of people said that they want to become like you when they grow older. I'm not saying anything that you are old or something, but yeah, it's just something nice to start the day with.
Did
So
actually somebody say that?
yeah. There is a comment. I'll send you a screenshot.
Oh,
There,
wow.
yeah.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, first off, I just wanted to ask you. So since right now most of us have been turning to our comfort watches, like go-to movies that you find comfort in. So
Right.
what has been something that you have repeatedly watched in the lockdown that you find comfort in?
Not repeatedly watched, but I just saw Memories of Murder last night. I've had a DVD of it for a very, very long time with me, but I had only seen it once when it was released in a movie theater when I lived in New York. The basic premise of the film I knew, but all the twists and turns I had forgotten, So it was exciting to watch the film, really. It's so cleverly made. And did you see this film called Raid? Gareth, his name is, right? He's a Irish filmmaker. Very,
Right.
very violent film.
Yeah.
Hardly any script. It's just action, action,
Hmm.
action in this one building. He has a show that was broadcast on BBC, or not BBC, British television last year called Gangs of London. It is exceptionally violent and it is so gripping.
Yeah.
It's like. Did you see Succession on HBO?
Yes.
Basically, Succession with all the violence, basically.
I was hoping you would recommend some feel-good stuff, but anyway, just
Yeah,
on while we're on that topic, any feel-good things that you'd like to.
I don't know. In fact, when I was making the list of films also that
Mhm.
I'll talk about in a short while with you,
Yeah.
I realized that actually it is the darker noir
Hmm.
uh, thrillers that excite me the most.
Now that you've brought up the subject of noir thriller kind of films,
Yeah,
so what are your like definitive recommendations on this genre?
I made a list of 10 films, and they're not all noir, by the way.
Yeah.
I very desperately tried to put a comedy also there and a few other
Yeah.
stuff. The oldest one is 1950, and the most recent one is probably 1980s or something like that. So that doesn't mean that I don't like new films. I like
Hmm.
a lot of new films. The first film in 1950 is Akira Kurosawa's Rashomon. I'm sure you've seen it. I'm sure many, many people have seen it. It is a classic that sort of introduced Kurosawa, Japanese cinema to the world. It started with Khan. When I was in college in Delhi University, I was attending French classes at Alliance Francaise. So I was about 18 or something like that. And they had a film club kind of a thing. And my mother was very strict. She wouldn't let me see films, but she would let me go to the Alliance thing, thinking that I'm learning French. The guy who was programming for this Alliance French Club, and they would show films on Wednesdays and Fridays, he would also get a lot of prints from the National Film Archives in Pune. Well, it's based on a short story, but the script is so smartly done where one point of view is sort of reflected upon by a number of people, including eventually a ghost also. And then there is another level of truth which is revealed in the end, which I won't give away. So I think Rashomon is just and I haven't seen it for a very long time, but it's a very precious film. I mean, Satyajit Ray talks about how he saw it quite a few times when it was released, and he
Yeah.
went to theaters in Calcutta. So
I just remembered this meme that I saw a few days back. It was from The Simpsons. It was a screen grab from The Simpsons. Homer Simpson says, "I remember you liking Rashomon," and Marge replies back saying, "That's not how I remember it." So yeah, it was just. Yeah. Now that we're on this topic, I wanted to know some classics. A lot of people, at least from my generation, would not have seen some of the essential films that you should see in Bollywood as well. So we'll come to that also.
one of my all-time favorite filmmakers is a man called Alfred Hitchcock. And if I was to think about which Hitchcock film I like, and there are quite a few that I like a lot, But the film that's given me the greatest joy, really watching it again and again, is Rear Window. Possibly also because I lived in New York for many, many years, and it is set in New York City, in the village, although it was shot in a studio. This whole idea of being locked up in your apartment, and people have very small apartment. Of course, in this case, the protagonist, played by Jimmy Stewart, he's broken his leg, so he's holed up there. You can actually look from one window into other people's apartments, and I've had that experience in terms of, not that I've seen any murders take place, but you can formulate stories based on looking at people across the street or something like that. It's such a smartly done. It's in the summer, and New York gets very hot in the summer, in July, August, very, very humid and hot. Like Bombay is like year round, I think. And this is also set, it was made in 1954, although it's a perfectly beautiful colored film. Very few people had air conditioning at that time. In fact, there are some people who also sort of sleep in their balcony or something like that. And then to be able to see and notice stories across, and then you suddenly see right across from you is this man, his wife is ill, and you start to imagine, and it is, you put two and two together that he's probably killed his wife. It's fantastic. It's funny as hell. And then there are some really Hitchcockian scary moments in it. There's a French film, which again, I saw at Alliance Française the first time, and I've seen it 10 plus times since then. It's Louis Malle's first film, called the American title was Elevated to the Gallows. The British title is Lift to the Scaffold, basically. It has Jean Moreau in it and Miles Davis's music, which is just absolutely stunning. And it's a story about a woman who's having an affair with her husband's colleague as such. A murder takes place, and the murderer gets locked up in the lift. It's over a long weekend, and as he's coming down, the janitor of the building shuts the electricity of the building, and he's stuck there. And Jean Moreau is walking through the streets of Paris with Miles Davis's very soothing, sexy music playing, and rain falling on her face. And it's the magic of black and white photography, but more than anything else, it's a story. It's got such amazing twists. The French were the first to appreciate the American film noir. In fact, the world film noir came, and this is a perfect film noir that the French did far better than I think most American film noirs.
So you mentioned how Hollywood noir was and French noir was also evolving at the same time. So any Hollywood thrillers like from the noir time that you
Well, I mean, there are films like Maltese Falcon, for instance. They're the classics. A lot of the Raymond Chandler books were made into really fantastic. Kiss Me Deadly. I actually did a course many, many, many years ago at Columbia University on film noir. I didn't know much about it. But the Maltese Falcon, for instance, it's like an absolute classic to watch. But the thing about noir films was that they were dark. They were black and white. They were dark. The characters were dark. There was always this one femme fatale kind of a sexy woman who had sort of double sides to it. But it's a cinematography. The word noir, actually, because it's black, it's the way it was done, where through the darkness in some of the scenes, the darkness of the story also evolves as such. Sort of post-Second World War in America, but it was already happening. But it was the French who really did a very good, they were who studied it. So it's people like Truffaut and Godard and Claude Chabrol who were writing for this French publication, Cahiers du Cinéma, before they became filmmakers. And Louis Malle, they started the French New Wave. And they're the ones who actually made Alfred Hitchcock into, they gave him a certain stature. In fact, I've got a book on Hitchcock that I'm going to recommend people should.
Is it Hitchcock Truffaut?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sure you read it, right?
Yeah, I tried reading it, but then I thought I should watch the documentary first. Then I didn't get around to reading.
I've seen the documentary. I saw the documentary only recently, but the documentary also talks about how this book was, these interviews were conducted, the meetings. It also has a lot of the filmmakers. I keep remembering David Fincher, and there are other filmmakers who come and they refer to and talk about Hitchcock's influence or something like that. The fascinating thing about this, and if you've seen quite a few Hitchcock films by the time you read the book, I mean, Truffaut really sits and asks him questions, and it's probably the best, Q&A sort of a book, really, where both these, a French man who could barely speak any English and this British man who always wore suits, they go through scene by scene and talk about, how things were constructed, and, it's a great book.
So just to round off the noir topic, any Bollywood noir films or thrillers that you like?
I saw Johnny Gaddar again recently. I think it's a very, very smart film, Johnny Gaddar. Probably the smartest one that Sriram Raghavan did. Although I think Andhadhun comes close to it, but Andhadhun gets very muddled by the second half. And by the end, he's trying to be too clever. There are some great moments in it. What I like about Shriram is that he, again, he's studied the films of that time period, and understands how do you construct sort of the noir thrillers.
Would Vijay Anand also qualify under noir?
Yeah, but Johnny Mera Naam and all these films, they were fun, clever thrillers. I would not deny it. I'm not a huge fan of Vijay Anand, but also like the point is that if you watch those films now, I find them very dated as such. Of course, Andhadhun was just 3 years ago, but even something like Johnny Gadar, which is like a 10 plus years old film, it's sharp as hell. Ek Hasina Thi, my God, clever, it's smart. There are people who swear by Vijay Anand. The thing is that, when I compare it with, if I see a Hitchcock film made in the 1950s, I can still watch it. I don't find it flawed. But I find really the songs are lovely, but I find the character, the comedy, the Iftikhar character coming everywhere, I find बहुत cliches होते हैं यार उन फिल्मों में यार. आप मुझे गाइड दे दो, मैं वो देख लूंगा.
Guide can qualify as a feel-good film if you think about it. But
it's such a sad film, yaar.
Yeah. So coming back to your list. So now you've covered the early noir films. So,
there might be more. In the 50s itself, the end of the decade is one of my, again, all-time favorite films. Francois Truffaut's 400 Blows, Quatre Fois Blow. It's a part autobiographical story of Truffaut's own life. It's got some really charming, delightful moments. It has some really feel-good moments if you talk in terms of children and the innocence. And yet, it's a very tough film to watch in terms of what the society does to a child, really. I used to joke with people about how, films like 400 Blows, films like Godard's Breathless, which I don't have in my list. There was something about the black and white era of these films set in Paris. I would love to have lived in that black and white world. Very magical. I could be very happy there. That ends 50s. So then I come to the 60s. And I'm picking an Indian film, and you have to pick a Satyajit Ray film because he's like God to me, God to many people. It becomes one of the tough things because I'm a huge fan of the Apu trilogy. I've seen, but I think Charulata has the gentleness and the quality, lyrical quality, which he was not able to. He himself acknowledges that as one of his best films. And the fact that Charulata is in black and white, again, there's some very sad moments. It's a very sad film at the end of the day, also, and basically also even this she falls in love with her her husband's cousin, and yet cannot take it any further. And the fact that she's a woman, and she, in that time in these Brahmo Samaj families, women were allowed to be educated and she can read and write, and yet she's locked up in the homes. There's this real duality in the situation, really. But the production design, the way it's shot, the music, the details to the beds, the bed cover they use, her saris. God, that film is just absolutely. It just really makes your heart very happy. Cinema as an art form, really, it's so pleasing to the eyes, and that's what Charulata is really. Really special.
Would that be the first Ray film you would like someone to get into Ray with?
Yes, I would think so, because of the fact that I want people to watch the Apu trilogy. But I think Charulata gives you a very fine sense of Ray. You get a sense of Ray as a director, Ray as a music composer. You have a Kishore Kumar song in it, Tagore song sung by Kishore Kumar. I think that probably should be the first one. And then they can, watch the trilogy. And I think the entire Apu trilogy should be seen without breaks or soon one after another. It gives you so much joy. Again, I was in my early 20s or late teens there. Lady Shri Ram College in Delhi University, they had a film society, and we heard through some friend that they were showing the Apu trilogy. So over a period of 3 days, I saw Patri Panchali, Aparajita, and Apur Sanchar, and my God, I don't think I've wept so much the first time. And of course, I even know when I'll start to cry, in each of the 3 films. I lived in New York for 35 years, and the Apu trilogy would be shown again and again, and I've seen them 3 back to back on the same day over a period of 3 days. I've lost count of how many times I've seen them, really. And when the 4K restoration happened, I saw those versions also. Interviewed the people who were behind the restoration work. Absolutely fabulous. But start with Charulata.
Right.
That was 1964. From 1964, I come to 1974, and I've got 2 films in 1974. 2 very different films. One's an Indian film. I'll come to that in a second. First of all, is this big Hollywood production, a film called Chinatown. You know, I have to make a point here. Roman Polanski, for all his greatness as a filmmaker, turned out to be a really shitty human being. We all know that, and the quote unquote crime, not quote unquote, it was a crime he committed. He acknowledged it. Was during or immediately after the making of Chinatown. I'm the one who still believes that. I mean, and a lot of people, you know, like that. I don't know. Maybe you think like that also. The people like Roman Polanski, people like Woody Allen, also. You cannot discount the art they created, because the art they created stands by itself. And there are, first of all, hundreds and other people, thousands of people who work on those films and projects. They're actors, they're script writers, there are just everybody involved in making of the film. We cannot, you know, just dismiss a film like Annie Hall, for instance, or Manhattan, because Woody Allen made them. And Chinatown is just such a superbly written script. You know, that period that they capture, you know, Los Angeles in the early 20th century. And gosh, what a story. I mean, I don't want to talk about it at all. And it needs to be watched a few times to really get the nuances and subtlety of the film, and great soundtrack. I find Chinatown very, very satisfying. And in fact, when I always think in terms of if I had to pick one Hollywood film, which would be my absolute all-time favorite Hollywood film, I would play between Chinatown and Godfather. I can try and look at Godfather without all the hype around it. And I know Godfather, you know, I can speak the dialogues while I'm watching it. But I think Chinatown is a sharper film. And maybe it has to do with the fact that I'm more drawn to sort of noir mysteries as such.
I watched As Good As It Gets after Chinatown. And ever since, I've just been scared of Jack Nicholson. If Jack Nicholson and Al Pacino ever do a movie together, I'll watch it, but I'll be very scared.
Al Pacino's made some fun films also, yeah. I recently saw One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest again after a good gap of like 15, 20 years. Seen it many times. I saw it in the theater when it was released in India in the late 70s. Then I saw it in New York, but I saw it again. Again, one of those films which I liked a lot. Because I hadn't seen it and I'd forgotten little details in it and all. The other Jack Nicholson film that I watched again a few months ago was Five Easy Pieces. And that one is such a revelation. I think I've seen it before. I didn't remember it that well. Have you seen it, Five Easy Pieces?
I haven't seen it.
Because, you know, you have this really carefree, happy-go-lucky sort of a guy who drinks a lot. He's also the sort of a, not a misogynist, but, you know, treats his girlfriend really badly. It's very self-absorbed, self-centered. And then at the end, toward the end, you discover the sadness in the character. It's a really hard-hitting film. So I was at 1974, and I talked about Chinatown, and that's the time in the early 70s. There are two Indian films that I wanted to talk about, and I sort of went back and forth because I wanted to talk about 10 films. And I decided to settle with this one, 1970, a film called Garam Hawa. The other film I probably would have talked about is Ankur. And I thought in terms of which had more of an impact on me. And eventually, I think Garam Hawa probably, because it is such a fine story about a Muslim family that decides to stay back in India and make India their home. And I think that film is so important to India today, or India at any time in period. You know, these people had the choice to leave. And they, at the end, they still stay back. Have you seen Garam Hawa?
Yes, I have.
Yeah. So at the end, I don't want to give away the end. What a fine performance of Barai Sari and Shaukat Azmi and Farooq Sheikh in his first role. He was so young and handsome, and all the actors. There's a young Jalal Agha in it. And this is the other side of my life story. There's a great Qawwali named Maula Salim Chisti, Aka Salim Chisti, which plays when Geeta and Jalal, the characters, they go to the Fatehpur Sikri. And the Qawwal sitting outside Fatehpur Sikri, the Salim Chisti's Dargah. I had liked that Qawwali a lot, and I actually had when I was young, I had an extended play EP record of that, which used to run at the 75 speed, and I lent it to somebody. A friend of mine borrowed it. In those days, I used to give things to people. Now I don't give anything to anyone.
I don't like where the story is going.
The story has good points. वो record तो गायब हो गया. वो सब
that's what I was scared of.
उसके बाद क्या हुआ कि मैंने फिर इतनी सर्च करी हर जगह इतना, बॉम्बे में वो होता था, वो बंद हो गया रिदम हाउस. हमेशा जाके उनसे मांगता था, वो बंद हो गया था, उनके पास नहीं थी. Finally, कनॉट प्लेस में दिल्ली में there used to be this record store called Mahata. It was a photography store, but they also had records, etc. And they said that they had the song and they would record it on a cassette player.
Right.
And they recorded the Qawwali for me, the cassette player. I'd already gone to New York. My dad picked it up and then actually sent it to me to New York through somebody else. I then had a very tragic life. 2001, I had a fire in my apartment in New York. सब जल गया था. सब कुछ जल गया था, including a letter from Satyajit Ray I had, वो भी जल गई थी. तो वो cassette भी जल गया. Many years later, I now know a man who actually, his company owns the rights to Garam Hawa and they restored the film.
Right.
And when I told him that I liked the Qawwali so much, he gave me a link to the Qawwali MP4. And I have it on my laptop and I can listen to it anytime. But अब वो, अब YouTube भी आ गया है, हर जगह चलती है. But I was talking about a time when there was no internet and really had to search for it. So it has a happy ending.
Yeah, so now that we're on the subject of partition, and I know that a lot of Hindi films have been made on the subject of partition because a lot of filmmakers came from that time. So what are some essential films that we should see regarding that time?
I think Deepa Mehta's Earth, which is based on Bapsi Sidhwa's novel, Ice Candy Man, reissued as Cracking India. And Earth, it was called Earth in the US, and in India it was released in 1947, Earth, because when she actually, Deepa Mehta even told me that she said कि Earth बनाई है. The people said to her, अरे वो तो महेश भट्ट ने बनाई थी Earth, आप क्या बता रहे हैं? Thing is that story is told from a neutral community point of view, the Parsis.
Right.
Have you seen it?
I haven't seen it, but I know the songs.
अरे यार प्लीज देखो. अरे वो तो आमिर खान की परफॉर्मेंस इतनी कमाल की है उसमें यार. राहुल खन्ना and Nandita Das, they're just absolutely brilliant. Amer especially, there's a transformation in his character I won't give away. It's a very, very powerful film. You see films like Gandhi, etc. They have their power. But I think Earth is probably one of the. I like Pinjar. It's a very good story, and I like the character that is played by Manoj Bajpayee. A Pakistani film made, Pakistani filmmaker who made Khamosh Pani. When I went to see Khamosh Pani in New York, the first big revelation to me was the film was in Punjabi. So I'm Punjabi. Not that I speak much Punjabi, and I still have to read subtitles. And then I met Kiran Kher many years later. A few years later in New York, she had come to see for the release, for a screening of Bari Wali. Rituparna Ghosh. There was a reception afterwards, and I walked up to her and I said, this was very good, but I thought you were very good in Khamosh Pani. She said, thank you. And I said, but your Punjabi was so good. So she looked at me, she said, but I'm a Sikhni. Like, I did not know. Khamosh Pani is a story about a Sikh woman who, during the partition, a lot of the women, they hid in these wells, etc., so that they wouldn't be killed or raped or something like that. Her family leaves her behind. They can't find her. And so she's left behind in what becomes Pakistan, and then marries a Pakistani man. And then there's a second level of the film about her son, this emotional connection that she has in India. बहुत शानदार film hai. I think Sabya Sumer uska naam hai, filmmaker ka. So this Australian filmmaker, Peter Weir, who people probably know him from Witness and Dead Poets Society. Mosquito Coast also, he made the two films he made with Harrison Ford. But when he was working in Australia, I mean, some of his early films with Mel Gibson, for instance, Gallipoli, Picnic at Hangi Rock, it's not Mel Gibson, but he made a film with Mel Gibson and Sigourney Weaver and set it in Indonesia called The Year of Living Dangerously. By the way, I just recently started doing a podcast with this company called Earshot. And so every week I recommend one film. It's a very short, like 3.5, 4 minutes I talk about the film. And I talked about Year of Living Dangerously also. Mel Gibson plays the role of a very young, very, very handsome Mel Gibson, because it's in early 80s, and Sigourney Weaver also like really glorious looking. He's a reporter from the Australian Broadcasting Corporation sent to Indonesia. And there's a lot of political turmoil going on in Indonesia. There's this communist upheaval and the military and things like that. And Sigourney Weaver works for the British, in the British embassy with sort of a secret military attaché kind of a thing. So you have this romance between these two, the backdrop of a newly independent country. Indonesia became independent in 60s. So it's set in the 60s. Became independent much later after India. The corruption and the poverty and the promise that Sukarno had, he was like a Jawaharlal Nehru kind of a character with the idealism and such. And that idealism, you see that sort of evaporating and dying when you see people are so ill. You put that along with these foreign journalists who are covering the politics and the communists sort of trying to take over. There's a fabulous performance by an American actress. Her name is Linda Hunt, who is not even 5 feet. I think she's 4 feet 9 inches. And in The Year of Living Dangerously, she plays the role of a man, Billy Kwan, who's half Australian, half Chinese. And Linda Hunt got an Oscar, Best Supporting Oscar. The first time an Oscar was given to a woman for playing a person for playing somebody from the other gender, basically. Really powerful, dramatic, romantic, the music. That's the kind of films that, sort of I can watch once every 5 years, 4-5 years, and it visually satisfying. So there's this amazing, the Greek musician Vangelis, the piece of called L'Opera Sauvage, which is used through the film. Otherwise, the music is by Maurice Jarre. So I think Year of Living Dangerously is just absolutely fabulous. So in 1984, I saw a film. I was in California. I lived there for 2 years, not knowing who these filmmakers were because they had not made a film before that. A film called Blood Simple. And also the 80s was a time when suddenly all these indie films that started coming. We started seeing Spike Lee's work and some of these young filmmakers. And the same multiplex idea that happened in India, that they would say like 1 or 2 screens would be for smaller films. In the US also, 1 or 2 would be like independent art house films, and the rest would be for big Hollywood films. And I went to see Blood Simple. I didn't know who the Coen brothers was. Nobody knew who the Coen brothers was. I still feel that the Blood Simple is their finest film. Have you seen it?
I haven't seen it, but
man, after California, I went to Boston for 2 years. In Boston, and even when I was back in New York, I used to have Blood Simple parties. I would invite people over, and then we would have dinner, we would have a party or something like that, and then we'd say, "Acha, kaun si film dekhi? Haan, Blood Simple dekhte hain." Or kisi ne dekhi nahi hoti, main pe chala deta. It's like the noir element to the height, really, with the twists and the turns, and the characters are so dark and shady. And what's really fantastic about it, there are four or five characters, but each of them do not know what is happening to the other characters. Only we as the audience know. And you sort of almost feel like warning them, look, this person is not there, this person is dead, or that, this misunderstandings. It's violent on and off, but it takes such a violent turn in the end. And I love violent films, man. I think I'm like really screwed up in my head. It is really, oh my God, what is happening? I think I've had a very calm life, so therefore I like violent films. The soundtrack of Blood Simple, again, Carter Burwell, I did not know who the man was. The piece that plays in it called Blood Simple, you should just go to YouTube and listen to the piece Blood Simple itself. It's a piano piece. It is so soothing and beautiful and relaxing, and it has a haunting quality to it. I'm a big Blood Simple fan. Uske baad, the range of films they've done, and they also had a few some misses, but lots of successful hits, and Fargo and No Country for Old Men, and some lesser known films also theirs. But number 10 film I have, it ends in 1985. So ऐसा नहीं कि 1985 के बाद मैंने कोई फिल्में देखी नहीं है. This is a comedy which I love a lot. So the Coen brothers also made a comedy very early in their career. The second film was Raising Arizona. It's funny as hell. And there's some. I remember screaming and laughing in the theater. I don't know if you've seen it, but the scenes of the babies crawling, when he goes to steal one baby, and these babies start to crawl, and one's coming down the steps, and it's just absolutely. And Nicolas Cage could be so good. He was so good in terms of this man, like how his life is such a mess because you have this crazy wife of his who's screaming that she wants a baby. The film I'm going to recommend is a film called Lost in America. It's directed by Albert Brooks. It stars Albert Brooks and Julie Haggerty. It's a story about an American couple living in California, and the guy was looking for, hoping to get a raise, and he doesn't get a raise, and he's told that you have to actually go to New York, and he thinks that's the demotion. So he goes and convinces his wife that let's just forget everything. Let's quit everything. All the money they've saved and their house and their car and everything else. Let's just cash. And they cash everything and buy an RV van, and they decide that they'll just travel through America. And you leave California, the nearest state to California, Nevada, and they travel to Nevada and, of course, end up in Vegas. And they think it's a great plan because we'll have a second marriage or something, and they get a honeymoon suite and everything else. I'm not giving away the rest of the film, but that their entire saving is blown away because the wife has this gambling addiction that she had never told her husband. And so in one night, all the money is gone. And then what happens to their lives? It is so funny. I mean, Albert Brooks is a very smart, hilarious as an actor, good writer, good director. And Julie Haggerty is a very fine sort of a match to him in this film. There are very few comedies I like, but it's a film that makes me laugh. So
Now that we're on the subject of comedies, let's look into more comedy recommendations. Could be from India, could be from the West as well.
यार इंडिया में वो सब जाने भी दो यारो वगैरह कहते हैं, ठीक है, people talk about अंदाज अपना अपना. I'm not crazy about that. A comedy that worked for me, by the way, and I helped sort of because I thought I helped the film with quite a good review, was Raj and DK's 99. It was just outrageously funny. I thought it was just so much fun, and I was very upset that Rediff, I still write for, the critic had, whoever reviewed the film had given it a very bad review. मुझे बड़ा गुस्सा चढ़ा. So Friday था, so I wrote to my editor and I said, ये क्या है भाई? इतनी कमाल की इतनी fantastic film है. He said, तुम लिख लो. So I wrote another review which is published on Monday, and hopefully it helped the film. The Goa zombie film was very funny also.
Yeah, go on.
I was in Pittsburgh. I used to program a film festival in Pittsburgh in September, and it had just been released that weekend, and it was running in a theater. And I went with an Indian friend of mine. She and I were the only ones in the entire theater in this afternoon, and I wasn't scared. It was like, listening to your own laughter echoing in this empty theater. It was quite an experience.
In your 1974 list, you mentioned it was either Garam Hawa or Shyam Benegal film Ankur. If someone has to enter Shyam Benegal, what would be the first film that you'd recommend?
Well, I would recommend that they should also read This Perfect Book, which I was going to come to.
Right.
By Sangeeta Datta, Shyam Benegal. And let me talk about Shyam Benegal since I praised this book right now. My political education, and I sort of grew up in a middle class, relatively privileged background in Delhi. Went to an English medium school. We ate well. We went out to restaurants, etc., and didn't really know the reality of India. But it was Shyam Benegal's films and Syed Akhtar Mirza's film that really opened my eyes to the other India. So Ankur, definitely people should watch. Nishant is very, very well made in terms of the way it's written. But it's a Girish Vijay Tendulkar script and it's vast cast of characters. And if you want to see Smita Patil the first time on the screen. But Manthan, which again talks about the caste divide in a rural village in Gujarat. Ankur talks about caste and class issues in a small village in Telangana. The early films of his, Bhumika, wow, what a story, what a powerful biopic he makes, and Smita Patil just blows your mind. I mean, I think those early films of Shyam Benegal, and he did some good work after that also. I think Junoon is just absolutely fantastic. I'm a big, big fan of Junoon, and I'm also, Kalyug has certain drawbacks in it, and in fact, this book also talks about how the Kalyug script took a while, and they're adapting Mahabharata into modern day thing, and they keep killing each other. But he had a coterie of actors with him, and the performances he would get from these people and the writing, Satyadev Dubey's writing, for instance. Junoon is a fantastic, fantastic film. And, the thing is that I really wish people had an opportunity. So Shashi Kapoor's eldest son, Kunal, had been slowly restoring all the 6 films that Shashi Kapoor produced. Well, the 6th one was completely bakwas, Ajuba. But so he's been slowly restoring them. So मैंने Junoon restored version 2 बारी देखी है. एक बारी इफी गोवा में दिखाई थी और एक बारी मामी में दिखाई थी. And other than the factor that you're watching the film and you realize that Shashi Kapoor is no longer there and Jennifer is no longer there and a few other actors are no longer there. Isma Chugtai is there. She plays Jennifer's mother. They're all out there because it's a period piece. The restoration is so beautiful that you think that that film would have been made just in the recent years. Shama Zaidi, who wrote the dialogues, great stuff. Right. So Shyam Benegal and even Syed Mirza's couple of early films, Arvind Desai ki Ajeeb Dasta, Albert Pinto ko Gussa Kyun Aata, especially those two. And then he made Salim Langde Pe Matro and Mohan Joshi Hazir Hai. And Naseem also basically. The class conflicts in India, the minority communities, their stories in Albert Pinto, Gussa Kyun Aata Hai, the plight of the Muslims, the way it is shown in Naseem. My understanding of Indian politics really came from their cinema.
Do you think that kind of work is happening in India? And if yes, then who are the filmmakers or films that, are doing for this generation what these films did to you?
Politics is very rarely now discussed in the same way as it was done at that time. First of all, it's becoming harder and harder for these filmmakers to make films with a censor board and the politics of India as such. But Hansal Mehta's Shahid, for instance, it's a devastatingly powerful story. A Muslim man basically changes his life after having been in jail and I don't want to give the rest of the film away, really, what happens to him, but great performance by Rajkumar Rao. Hansal has done a couple of very, very powerful films. Aligarh is exceptional also. So, not in the same way. I mean, Vishal's Bhardwaj's films, some of them are just fantastic, what he's done with his Shakespearean adaptations, or even a big Bollywood film. Kameena is a big Bollywood film, isn't it? I mean, really fun, clever, smartly done thriller. I like Abhishek Chaube's films. I like that he again and again sort of tries something else. I like Vikram Motwani. He's made like 4 or 5 films, 5 or 6 films or something like that. Each is completely different in terms of genre, the way he looks at stories and subjects. Look, I'm a big fan of some of the younger filmmakers. I'm a big fan of what's been happening in Marathi cinema in the South, some of the brilliant films. This past year, there have been such great films. I mean, Ib Aliu was fantastic. Gamakar, I loved. A Tamil film called Nasir by Arun Karthik, which hopefully will still making round the film festivals, hopefully will open up, go places. A Marathi film by a guy called Akshay Indikar called Sthal Puran, which went to Berlin exactly a year ago. Lovely, sweet film from a child's perspective. So there's a lot of good Indian cinema happening, and I program a film festival, so I spend a lot of time watching these new independent films. I don't see the Syed Mirzas and Sham Benegals. The things were difficult even in the 60s or 70s. Films would get banned. I mean, Garam Hawa went through a lot of political problems and censorship problems, but फिर भी release हो जाया करती थी उस ज़माने में फिल्में. By the way, there's a Satyajit Ray book that I wanted to recommend to people. It's called Our Films, Their Films. It's a collection of essays that Satyajit Ray wrote. It's one of the first film books I read when I was very young, and I was just in fact reading the first chapter again. Which, like in 1958, he writes an essay about why don't Indian films. 1948, Indian films travel abroad very well. This is like 5, 6 years, 7 years before Pathe Panchali was made. This is a book where he talks when he discusses Garam Hawa and Ankur. In the reference to Ankur, he referred to Shabana Azmi as one of the finest dramatic Indian actresses. और वो शबाना आज तक वो कोट करती है. Forget all the Padma Bhushan. This is Bharat Ratna se bhi uska upar.
Yeah, so now I think it's a good time to jump into books on films. So you've had 3 books that you've recommended so far.
Yeah, there are 2 more I wanted to recommend. One is when you talk about biographies, of course, people should read my books. This is a fantastic biography. Madhu Jain, who's a journalist who wrote for India Today for a very long time, on the Kapoors. It's got some great chapters. The chapter on Prithviraj Kapoor is just absolutely brilliant. And Raj Kapoor, and then, Shami. When I wrote my book on Shashi Kapoor, this was a big help to me. And of course, it talks about Rishi also.
I'm so sorry. Who was that on the cover?
That's Prithviraj Kapoor, yaar.
I couldn't recognize him, but yeah.
That's Prithviraj Kapoor, who looked like, he looked like Shashi.
I thought it was Kunal Kapoor for some reason.
Their gene is so strong.
Yeah.
Their gene is so strong. This is Prithviraj Kapoor. At the back, it says, is a quote by Randhir Kapoor. We are like the Corleones and the Godfather. Prithviraj Kapoor bada handsome tha, तभी तो उसके बेटे इतने handsome निकले.
Right.
Sanjana told me that when I was writing the book on Shashi Kapoor, that Jennifer was so strict with her family, and that's why the kids grew up to be like very normal people. I mean, they are Rishi and Ranveer's cousins, but their upbringing is so different, really. They didn't have a television set at home for the longest time. They only got a television after Jennifer died, and Shashi was by the time too old, and Kunal was staying with Kunal, and Kunal's had children, and therefore, so they didn't have a TV at home. But this film, Sikandar, one of Prithviraj Kapoor's early films, was coming on television. Shashi and Jennifer rented a TV for one night, and Sanjana kept looking at her grandfather and kept saying, "Papa, Papa," you look like her dad. Shashi looked just like his younger brother, really. Great read. All of us sort of know the Kapoors very well. And it's a very good way of writing biographies. The other book that I like a lot, and I also am a big fan of this man, is Hanif Qureshi, the British Pakistani writer Hanif Qureshi. This is called London Kills Me, and he's got 3 of his screenplays and 4 essays. And the reason why this book, and especially Hanif Qureshi, has made such a big difference in my life. Hanif Qureshi wrote the script for 2 films, but some of the earliest, living in the US all these years, in the 80s, I mean, there was not much being spoken. This is before Meera Nair made Mystery Masala, for instance. Hanif Qureshi wrote a script for a film called My Beautiful Laundrette, which I recommend. People should definitely watch. Story about the Pakistanis in England, and corruption, there's crime, there's drugs. And it's also a story about gay relationship between the Pakistani young man and a British young man, and the British young man is played by Daniel Day-Lewis. It's one of Daniel Day-Lewis's early films. And then there's a screenplay called London Kills Me, which was a film that Hanif himself directed, which didn't work too well because he's not a good director, not good at directing. He's a very good writer. But he wrote another script called Sammy and Rosie Get Laid. So both Sammy and Rosie Get Laid and My Beautiful Laundrette were written by Hanif Qureshi and directed by Stephen Frears. Sammy and Rosie Get Laid had Shashi Kapoor in it. It's a film very few people have seen. It never came to India, maybe some festival or something like that. And again, it's hard to get, but if you can search for it, you might be able to find it. Shashi Kapoor plays sort of a Zulfikar Ali Bhutto kind of a character in it, who has been a very popular politician in Pakistan, has made a ton of money through corruption, and now he's got all these human rights abuses, charges, etc. And he's basically run away from Pakistan to come to stay with his son, Sammy, who was played by Ayub Khan Deen. I don't know if you know the actor Ayub Khan Deen. Ayub Khan Deen later became very well known for writing the script of East is East, which was an Om Puri film. It's set again in the 80s, London during Margaret Thatcher's time. There's class issues going on. There's sexual liberation. Sammy goes and sleeps with somebody else, and his wife Rosie is sleeping with this. There was this British punk rock group called the Fine Young Cannibals, and Roland Gift, who's the lead singer in it, he's Rosie's boyfriend in it. And Shashi Kapoor himself's character, he comes and he has an old love, fame. This woman he had a relationship with, he's come to look for his old love also.
Is this a Merchant Ivory?
No. Very different than Merchant Ivory, because Hanif Qureshi, these are much angrier films. They're much rebellious. Hanif Qureshi once gave an interview and then he regretted. He said that when he sees a Merchant Ivory film like Room with a View, for instance, he gets very angry with how beautiful it is, and they're always drinking tea. And he said, I want to break their teacups. Because, the thing is, the Merchant Ivory were making films. They were making these films also, Room with a View and Howard's End, they're all made in the 80s and 90s. But they were set in the early 20th century. And that was also in England. But Hanif was writing about in England where there was homelessness, joblessness, racism. There was class wars going on during Margaret Thatcher's time. And Hanif was a very big part of that movement. And so that, came in his writing also.
I just remembered, so you mentioned how England was going through a difficult time, and we were speaking about comedy. So there was the Full Monty. I don't know if you have.
Yep. There's unemployment there also. They lose their jobs and everything else. Full Monty is a lovely film.
I love the tagline. I don't know where it was. On some poster it said, "No money, no jobs, no underwear." That's pretty decent. So you mentioned about Shashi Kapoor, and I wanted to know a little bit more about the Merchant Ivory films, because not a lot of those films are accessible in India, and we haven't watched most of those. So what are the films that you would like to recommend from that genre?
The best work that Merchant Ivory actually did was not with Shashi Kapoor. Howard's End, by the way, that's the podcast I did. I think it's up today on earshot.in. If somebody goes there, I'm going to post it on social media also today. Yeah. Howard's End, Remains of the Day, Morris, A Room with a View. So Morris, A Room with a View, and Howard's End, all three were based on E.M. Foster's novels. All three scripts written by Ruth Chawbala. So James Ivory, he's still alive. He's 92, going to be 93 next month. He's American. His business partner and life partner was a man called Ismail Merchant, who was a Bombay-born guy who went to America to do his MBA from NYU, but he was so obsessed with films, and they both started making films. And the third partner in the team was a British German Jewish woman called Ruth Prawar Jhabwala. She had an India connection. She married an Indian architect called Cyrus Jhabwala. Merchant Ivory team produced over 30 films. Ruth Chawbala and Ismail and James Ivory probably did at least half of the Ruth wrote for them. And there came a time when they were so close, and Ruth had also moved to New York with her husband, that three of them bought apartments in the same building in New York. And they would meet every day for breakfast. And then they would have different, things going on, etc. So yeah, people should definitely watch those. The early films that they did with Shashi Kapoor, I mean, Householder is a lovely, sweet film. You can look for it, you can find it somehow. Householder and Shakespeare Wala. Householder has some very interesting parts of the story. I mean, Shashi Kapoor, very young, plays a Hindi school teacher who's like harassed by his mother and, dealing with problems at work. And then in the school he teaches, and it's beautiful, beautiful wife, Leela Naidu, plays the role of the wife. And once they had finished Householder, James Ivory had made a connection with Satyajit Ray. And so went to meet Satyajit Ray sent him a telegram or something like that. We would like to show you the film. And Satyajit Ray said yes. And from Delhi, they boarded a train to Calcutta with those big reels of the film. And they showed the film to Satyajit Ray. And Satyajit Ray then agreed to re-edit the film, recut the film for them with Dulad Lata. And he said, you can look at it, they don't interfere. James Ivory, I've interviewed him a few times, and he talks about how he would be at the back and Satyajit Ray would be standing tall as hell and loud sort of voice, and Dulad would be on the whatever the machine was, and Satyajit Ray would suddenly tap him on his shoulder, cut. Jim Ivory would jump up, kind of a thing. So Satyajit Ray refined the film, and it made it worked much better. So they used Satyajit Ray's cut of the film. Later, Satyajit Ray did the music for Shakespeare Wala. Shakespeare Wala was partly inspired by Jennifer Kendall's father's parents' story, because they had a company called the Shakespeareana, and they used to travel around India performing Shakespearean plays in schools and colleges. And it's India immediately after independence, and Indians are losing interest. They're not more interested in Shakespearean plays. And the Hindi film industry is becoming very, sort of taking over. And this lovely actress, Madhur Jaffrey, who became a major cookbook writer, she still lives in New York, plays the role of an actress, a Bollywood sort of an actress in that film, won the Best Actress Award at Berlin. So it's really interesting. I talked about Charulata earlier.
Yeah.
Charulata was a 1964 film, but in 1965, it played in competition at Berlin in February. Madhur Jaffrey won the Best Actress, Silver Bear. Satyajit Ray won the Silver Bear for the Best Director. So there are two Indian films that won that year. Merchant Ivory made some fine films. They did a really sweet film with Paul Newman and Joanna Woodward called Mr. and Mrs. Bridge. Vanessa Redgrave was often in their films. Emma Thompson, Anthony Hopkins in both Remains of the Day and Howard's End. So that's the time when those films became really strong, and they started winning the Oscars also. Ruth Jawala won 3 screenplay writing Oscars. Emma Thompson won her Best Actress Oscar for Howard's End also. Really good stuff Merchant Ivory did.
So you mentioned briefly on books on Indian cinema. Are there any more books that you can recommend, especially about the 20th century, like the Kapoors or filmmakers of that time?
Rachel Dwyer has written a very well-written biography. She was very close to him also on Yash Chopra. That's a really good book to read. There are a couple of books on Bimal Roy. There's a book that people can find it. It's actually edited by Bimal Roy's daughter, Rinki Bhattacharya, who was Basu Bhattacharya's wife. There have been some really good biographies that came out. My friend Yasser just recently wrote a book on Guru Dutt, for instance. It's more about his personal life. But there was another book on Guru Dutt that Nasreen Muni Kabir had written, more about him as the filmmaker. Quite a few books on Raj Kapoor, etc. I'm only talking about Hindi filmmakers. I know Minal Sen wrote his autobiography. Satyajit Ray, there's so much been written, so many books. There are 2 biographies of Satyajit Ray that people should read if they want to know about Satyajit Ray. Andrew Robinson's biography and a biography by a woman called Marie Seaton. Both are just absolutely fantastic. Cover Satyajit Ray's life and work substantially, very well.
And the first book we discussed was Hitchcock Truffaut. So any other essential books that people should read about cinema?
There's a book I like a lot called The Celluloid Closet, and that looks at how homosexuality was treated and looked at in Hollywood. I think that's a really good book. There's a recent biography that's come out. I have not read the book. I've read excerpts from it on Mike Nichols, the guy who made Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, The Graduate, Birdcage, and Heartburn. I think it's a fantastic book that people should get hold of if they can. There's a book on Akira Kurosawa by Donald Ritchie. Donald Ritchie was a British writer, an expert on Japanese cinema. That's a fantastic book. I mean, I think, people, if they want to really understand, I mentioned Rashomon as a first film. Yeah. I mean, Kurosawa's work is just mind-blowing. Apart from, the crowd-pleasing sort of the samurai film, and the Shakespearean films he did, whether it was Throne of Blood or Ran, Kagemusha, the other stories he did, the thrillers, the dark films. He made a very beautiful film called Ikuru, about an old man who has cancer and he doesn't tell his family that he's dying. And Ritesh Batra, when I was writing the book on Irfan Khan, told me that he actually modeled Irfan's character after that old man in Ikuru. Just his demeanor, the way he carried his clothes and his shoulders and everything else. Kurosawa's work is very, very important that people want to understand cinema really should go there.
You mentioned your biography on Irfan and on Shashi Kapoor, and there's one on Priyanka Chopra as well. So any biographies or autobiographies that you like reading?
Jerry Pinto wrote a fantastic book on Helen. It's a very, very good biography on Helen. Yasser has done a couple of books. I'm not at all a fan of Sanjay Dutt, but that was good. But his Rekha book was very, very popular. Yasser and this other friend of mine, Gautam Chintamani, simultaneously wrote books on Rajesh Khanna that came out about the same time. They're still very different. Anupma Chopra wrote a really good biography of Shah Rukh Khan called The King of Bollywood. I would recommend that book to a lot of people. And at the same time, there's this two documentaries that Nasreen Muni Kabir made called The Inside and Outside World of Shah Rukh Khan. I think that's what it's called. Shah Rukh Khan, The Inside, the Outside World. Especially the first one, The Inside World. The Outside World is about Shah Rukh traveling through US and other parts of the world for one of these music concerts with Arjun Rampal is in it, and I forget who else was there. But the Inside World is both the Inside World and in Anupma Chopra's book. Shah Rukh can be so honest. The way, he's become such a big mega star and becomes so rich in everything else. But when he talks about nostalgia, about his childhood and how losing his parents, there's a lot of honesty in Shah Rukh Khan that comes across that you can see in these books, in this book and this film.
Are there any blogs that you follow on cinema, or just any general writing blogs that you follow?
Not anymore. Yeah, blogs, मैं अब बहुत कम पढ़ता हूँ. There was a time one used to, but now, you go on Twitter all day long. There's just so much to read in any case. But there were a couple of blogs that were started by these people in Bollywood industry. Most of them I know, but, Passion for Cinema was like really very, that launched all of these people, including Anurag and everybody else. And then this other friend of mine, Somen Mishra, was running Moa Fight Club. Again, I thought it was a really sharp blog where he would, the commentary, and they would expose, a lot of exposure in terms of investigative stories and something like that. There's a lot of good stuff there. I don't know if I read any. Do you read blogs now?
I try and follow, I think Manula Dagis has her...
She has a blog?
Yeah, it's like a collection of her reviews. A.O. Scott has his own thing. I'm forgetting there was another critic, David Bodwell. David Bodwell has a blog, like he has very academic kind of essays that he publishes on his blog.
I love reading their reviews. Sometimes you want to read it twice, really. You understand it, then you want to understand more, and then you want to see how it's been constructed, sentence by sentence, paragraph by paragraph, and how the narrative sort of flows through in their thinking. I think it's very good if people want to become, learn to become writers or something, critics.
Who are the critics that you like to read?
Some of the critics in the IndieWire critics, for instance, some of them are really good, some of the writing ones. In India, most of the critics are friends of mine, so it becomes difficult not to be biased. But I think Shubhra Gupta, although I don't agree with her, she doesn't like things and I like things, but I like her writing. Namrata Joshi's writing I like a lot. There are a couple of younger writers who I think are very fine in the writing. Rahul Desai is very good. I think Uday Bhatia and Tanul Thakkar is also a very fine writer. Again, Tanul, I don't agree necessarily. I don't bring it up, but there's this passion that they have in the writing. Baddy Bhardwaj Rangan, especially follow him for his popular cinema from South. I get to see a lot of independent films from South because I program a film festival and I follow other film festivals also. But with popular cinema, more and more South Indian cinema is becoming accessible now, because many of these films are just opening directly on Netflix or Amazon, or are coming very soon after the theatrical release. So it's good to hear what Baddy has to say. Bhardwaj Rangan, sorry.
So I'll just move to the closing section of our discussion. So you mentioned some films that had great music. So I just wanted to know some great background scores that you'd like to recommend, or any films that have great music.
Once Upon a Time in America, Ennio Morricone's soundtrack, just absolutely stunning, haunting. The Godfather soundtrack, for instance. Some of the films I had mentioned in my list also, the Blood Simple music is just so precious, really, by Carter Burwell, who then ended up doing a lot of other work also. Maurice Jarre, who composed most of the music for Year of Living Dangerously, did a lot of other big films. Witness has some great music. Peter Weir is a really fantastic filmmaker who made some really good stories, and started small in Australia, but then he went to Hollywood, and when you look at a film like Witness, for instance, it's so well constructed as a thriller, and it's a popular film, and yet done in a very sort of artful manner, whether it's observing a different community or just the story narrative. But the music is just fantastic, and it's Maurice Jarre's music in that also.
And in general, any artists that you like listening to?
Musicians?
Yeah.
Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan. I don't listen to him that much anymore. I was a Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan groupie. Okay, I'm going to show off now. I've seen Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan perform 8 times live in New York City. 8 times. It was just fantastic. One of the best concerts he gave was in Central Park. It was a free concert to mark Pakistan's Independence Day, 50th anniversary of Pakistan independence, which is like a day before India. And again, it was in August. It was so hot and muggy. New York can be really hot and muggy, and people were going crazy. I mean, he sang Allahu for like half an hour, Allahu for like more than half an hour. I mean, it just in Qawwali with the improvisation, they get fed by the energy of the audience. You know, people are dancing so much, then that energy feeds the musicians, and they keep going on and on and on. There's a lovely BBC radio piece that Muhammad Hanif did. It's about when he was very young in his village. Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan used to come and perform. You know, Muhammad Hanif he's a very well-known
Yes.
Pakistani writer. He wrote that great book called The Case of Exploding Mangoes, one of my favorite books. Going to cover a Nusrat concert in Washington, D.C. It's a radio piece for BBC he did. बहुत kamal ka piece hai wo. Every year on Nusrat's death anniversary, something like that, I posted on Twitter and other places. It's a great pleasure to listen to it. Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan was God, man. As you know, I discovered my Punjabi roots through Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan. I lost that connection I had. And then when you start to listen to his music and you realize Sufi music, and there's this he's talking to God and everything else. But he's also, he was singing Punjabi, and it's a language I grew up in listening, hearing my grandparents, my mother speak, and yet I kept, my education was not in Punjabi, it was in English, and Hindi was the language you spoke in Delhi. But through Nusrat Qawwali, a lot of the Punjabi came back.
So you mentioned your film festival, the New York Indian Film Festival that you curate. So any films that you have discovered through your festival that you would like to recommend?
Just wanted to mention my festival. So we have the next festival coming up June 4th to 13th. It's our 21st edition. And because of the COVID situation, although New York has suddenly opened up substantially, we are doing a virtual online festival, which is what we did last year also. But this is the big one we are doing. We have 58 films, out of which about 31 features, including documentaries. All the films can be seen in the US, some in North America also, which is Canada, and quite a few globally. So all the shorts you can see in India, and I think there are about 7 or 8 features that you can watch in India also. This year we're opening with a Kannada film called Where is Pinky? Pinky Ellie. Again, people in India can't see it, but it's a US premiere. I went to Busan last year, and then it was at IFFI, Goa. And we are closing with a film called Fire in the Mountains, Ajit Pal Singh's film, the Hindi film shot in Uttarakhand. It went to Sundance. Both are really great. And we have 2 centerpieces, a documentary called Ahimsa Gandhi, The Power of the Powerless. Ramesh Sharma, who made New Delhi Times, it's his documentary where what he does is he looks at Gandhi's influence outside India. So whether it's Martin Luther King or Nelson Mandela or Lech Walesa or various movements around the world, and he follows that, how the word of Gandhi spread. And another one is called Womb, Women of My Billions, about a woman who walked all the way from Kanyakumari up to Srinagar, talking with women about their rights, about their mental issues and other issues and problems women faced in their lives. We're doing a sort of a tribute to Satyajit Ray because it's his 100th year anniversary. So we have an old documentary from 1984 called The Music of Satyajit Ray. We're also showing a documentary, which is a world premiere, called Talking Head on Dhritiman Chatterjee. And he talks a lot about working with Satyajit Ray, starting with Prathidandi and then working with Mrinal Sen about the same time with Padatik and all.
So yeah, that was everything from my end. Anything that I have missed that you'd like to
No,
recommend?
we've been talking for a very long time. This has been great. I hope people will not get bored.
Thank you so much, Asim, for
Thank you.
joining us and
Thank
giving
you.
us so many lovely recommendations. I do hope I'll be able to watch all the movies
Yeah.
that you've recommended.
You guys are really great. I love what you and Vaibhav and others are doing, really. I mean, I love your sort of this passion again and love for cinema and arts. People should subscribe to Chalchitra Talks, definitely. And thank you.